apple bud. Hey everyone, it's Abby here. This week we're going to be talking about apples. We have a couple of apple trees on the edge of the property and outside the fence. And they were looking good, so Joel and I picked some this morning, and we're going to make a nice apple crumble or apple crisp with these apples. Let's take a look at our ingredients before we start. This is going to be our first dessert, I think, that we're covering in this video series, and typically baking has more ingredients. So we're going to be using flour, oatmeal, some eggs, butter, lemon juice, salt in this jar, sugar in this bag, and then we have ginger, allspice, and cinnamon, as well as our apples. So a crumble or a crisp is essentially fruit on the bottom of a baking pan with an oatmeal crumble on the top, and both elements are going to be sweet, but the eggs are going to be added to the apple to make it a little more custardy, and then the butter will be added to the oats and the flour to make it more like a pie, like a little bit of a crunch, a little bit of that crisp on top. You can do this with any kind of fruit, really. Apples are what are in season. If you wanted to do a pumpkin pie like that, you could even do it like that and add some of the oat crisp on top to add a bit of a textural difference to it. Alrighty, so before we get started, I'm gonna preheat the oven. The oven up here takes a little longer than my oven at home to preheat, so I like to make sure that it's set to the right temperature before I start any chopping or anything, so that by the time I'm done, I can just put the dish straight in the oven. So we're gonna bake this at 375 today, so just go ahead and preheat your oven to that temperature. Alrighty, so now we're gonna prep our apples. So these apples are sort of wild in that they aren't treated with any kind of things that are gonna stop bugs from getting to them. So we're gonna have a little bit of worms in them, but that's really no problem because we're gonna be cutting these into such small pieces that we can just cut around any blemishes that we find. One thing that you want to do, so it's nice to have two different sized knives when you're working with smaller fruit, and especially when you're working with fruit that you're going to have to sort of clean up. For example, if I wanted to cut this out, instead of using this big knife, it's easier to just use a small knife to get to it, and just cut it out that way, like that. And so you can see there's going to be some worms in these, but it's not, we can just avoid them. We can just cut the worms out. So let's get to it. I'm gonna just cut these in half, kind of see where we're at. Yeah, so maybe this one isn't as salvageable, but maybe it is on the other side. So I'm gonna set that aside. Taking a look at them all. This one looks pretty good. So we'll just have these and clean them up and then get them into the bowl with some lemon juice. Check back in. Alrighty, so the apples are all chopped up. We have them in little mini slices, kind of. Some are chunkier than others, some are thinner than others. That's fine. They'll all cook and taste the same in the end. So to this, we are going to add a little bit of lemon juice. And this is a good, oop, if it's coming out. This will be a good balance for the sweetness in the apples. Maybe about a tablespoon amount is good. Just mix them. And also lemon juice helps to keep the apple flesh white so it won't brown too much and oxidize. We don't really care too much about the aesthetics of it, but acid does help delay oxidization on the fruit. I'm gonna put in a little bit of sugar. These apples are really sweet, so it really doesn't need too much. I'm maybe gonna do like a scant, like maybe only that much. And then mix it again. All right. So it looks like the apples are all coated in the sugar and lemon. We want the crust to have some spice in it, but we also want the apples to have good flavor. So I'm gonna do about equal parts of ginger and cinnamon, and then maybe half as much of the allspice. So I'm gonna put maybe a couple teaspoon and a half, maybe 2 teaspoons And then some cranks of the ginger. I mean the cinnamon. These are really typical fall spices, and they pair really well with any kind of squash or pumpkin or apple, even pear. But you also don't want the spices to really overpower the actual taste of the fruit. So that's why I'm not gonna put too much. You can always add more too. You can always taste it and add more. So I'm gonna mix these together again. And then I think I'm gonna taste it and see. Because eventually we're gonna add an egg to this. So you wanna taste it before you add the raw egg, because you don't wanna eat raw egg. But right now it's just apple and spices, and that should be fine. Alrighty, so now we're gonna make the crumble. So I'm gonna add in our flour first to the food processor. It's about a cup or so. And then I'm gonna put maybe 1 spoonful of sugar. Nah, 2 spoonfuls. And then I would add a little bit of salt, but we're gonna be using salted butter. So I don't want it to be too salty. You can always taste it again and then see and add later. So I'm gonna err on the side of caution and not add any salt yet. We're gonna add in 2 sticks of butter, so that'll be 1 cup of butter. And yeah, so this is the salted, so. Let me cut this one. Paper sticking on Alrighty, and then I'm also gonna put in a little bit of our oats. So we want the oats to be whole when we're sprinkling it over the apples, but it is nice to add a few in to the blender so that we can get a little bit of the oat flour and kind of disperse the oaty taste kind of throughout the crumble. So maybe about half as much or a third of as much flour as you put in. I'm also going to do a little bit of cinnamon in the crust, but this you can also add later if you wanted. It doesn't matter so much. Maybe 2 teaspoons of it. Kind of to get the flavor in there, but not overpower the spice in the apples. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Cool. So you just want to blitz it until it's like a sandy, crumbly texture, like that. So we have bigger pieces of butter, which is fine, and then we also have smaller pieces, which is also great. So from here, well, yeah, let's do this. Alrighty, so we got 3 eggs from the farm. I'm only gonna use 2. I'm gonna just crack them right in here. Not there, in here. And then dump them over our seasoned and cut apples. And this will help kind of hold the apples together and make it a little more custardy. So as the apples bake, they're going to be releasing some of their juice, and hopefully that'll kind of meld with the egg and make it a little more cohesive underneath the crumble topping. Alrighty, so here we go. Over the apples it goes. Mix it all up. And then actually before I put the apples in, we're gonna grease the pan. This is just some neutral oil. If you have like a spray, you can do that too. But the sugar from the apples is really the reason why you want to grease it. You don't want the sugar to be released from the juices and then just burn the bottom of your delicious, delicious dessert. So it's good to just do this. Let's be sure and always get the corners. Alrighty. Then we're gonna go ahead and dump the apples in. Here, go like this. Alrighty. And then we want to spread them out pretty evenly in the dish. Like so. And then we can scatter our crumble on top. So now that I'm looking at this, I'm gonna add a little more oatmeal just to make sure, or oats, just to make sure that it'll cover the top and make as big of a layer as I want it to be. So maybe like 1.5 handfuls. Mix it all up. All right, that looks good. Cool, it's ready to go in. Alrighty, so now we're gonna put it in. A couple words about that. So if you have put it in a dish where it's like really close to the top, you may want to put a baking sheet underneath so that if there are any juices that spill out, they'll spill out onto a baking sheet instead of onto the bottom of your oven. So it'll be easier to clean up. You won't create a lot of smoke. The other thing is crumbles can take a long time to cook or kind of a short time to cook. So for me, I usually start checking around 20 minutes after I've put it in, just to see if it looks halfway done or a little more, a little less. Ooh, this is, so I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and check on it in 20 minutes, but it could take 30 minutes, it could take an hour. You want to make sure the crumble is the thing that you're looking at, so once it's like a golden brown, it's crunchy and it's done, then your crumble is done. The fruit underneath can be a little crunchier, it can be a little softer. There's a lot of wiggle room with the apples, but the top part is what you want to look at when you're looking for doneness. All right, so you can see it's kind of, the oats are a little brown. We have some caramelization going on the bottom of the pan. Yeah, the apples are nice and tender. So we're gonna just go ahead and scoop some out. See how it looks. All right, so apple crisp is really good normally with any kind of ice cream or whipped cream. Just that dairy component adds a little bit of like richness and fattiness. That's just a really good compliment. Probably even just a glass of milk would be good with it.